coming. So I think we're pretty safe to get started. It seems like the rush of people coming in has slowed, but Shelley can continue to admit them as we go. So I am going to get started. Welcome everybody to our final meeting of the First District RESA Autism Consortium for this school year. I know it's been a really busy time of year, so I really want to take the time to just thank everybody for participating in this. We are excited to bring you today's presentation. We've really valued your input, and we'd love to hear from you about ideas moving forward as well. So at the end, I'm going to send out a needs assessment, and we really would appreciate for you guys to fill it out so we know how to best serve you moving forward. Most of you probably know us by now, but I want to just take a quick moment to introduce you to our team here at First District RESA. We have two different GLRS offices. We've got Coastal GLRS with our director, Kim Bennett, who is on today. Kim, do you want to say hello?
Yes, sorry. Good morning, everyone. I'm super excited you guys are here. Thank you for just doing all that you do for our districts and really championing this work.
All right, I am the program specialist at Coastal, Amanda Major, and we also have Southeast GLRS, and I'm pretty sure we've got both members of that team here today too. Our director is Kathleen Tootle. You want to say hello?
Good morning, everyone. I hope you're having a fabulous week, and I look forward to just working with you guys and hearing more and more that Amanda is willing to share with all of us.
Thank you. And we also have the program specialist, Shelley Woodward, who is facilitating today.
Good morning, everybody.
This is our agenda for the meeting. We're going to do a really quick check-in, and then I have some updates. We are going to have our guest speaker who's going to provide us with a presentation on some behavior management strategies and preference assessments. And then we're going to have time for some questions, and I am going to send out that needs assessment. And again, I just want to ask you guys to take a moment to fill it out because we really want to make these better and really have more meaningful conversations and just anything that you guys think you would benefit from. That's what we want to deliver. So just so we can have an idea of our audience today, could you please just enter this information into the chat box, your position, your district, and the number of years you've been in education? So we have Evans County in special ed self-contained for 11 years. We've got severe profound. We've got speech pathologist from Jeff Davis. We've got Ms. Flo, the program specialist, 35 years. You guys are going to hear from her in a moment. Let's see, Athling County, Candler County, Cedarwood GNETs, Wayne County, Effingham. Great. And we've got a wide range of experience in here in lots of different positions. So that's really awesome. Chatham County, McIntosh County, Bullock. Great. It looks like we've got people from almost all of our area, which is really exciting. We've got BCBA from Athling County. Awesome. Welcome. We're glad you're here. And for our check-in, we're going to have two parts. And I want you to just take a minute to think about these two questions. And then I'm just going to ask for, let's say, 4 or 5 volunteers to unmute. And you can volunteer by raising your hand. What is the most popular reinforcer or reward in your classroom? And what has been the most unique? So if you got something good or you want to share, if you could just raise your hand, we're just going to take a few. All right, Kendra.
One of the things that I use in my classroom is Sowell Bucks, and they get to earn that. And based on answers, based on doing a good job, based on being able to move their name up, just different things, following classroom rules, helping another classmate. And then a couple of times a month, I give them the opportunity to use those to redeem things from my store. It's things that people may have donated, little Happy Meal toys. I'll go buy things from the Dollar Tree, and some things may be worth $5, some things may be worth 10, some things may be worth 20. So they're using a system within the classroom not only to reward but also to learn money and value and purchasing too.
Cool. I have seen some really great kind of stores run in classrooms. That's exciting. All right. We've also got one in the chat box. Skittles were a favorite, but we would cut them into 4s. And the most unusual was spaghetti sauce. Spaghetti sauce is a good, unusual one for sure. I had pepperonis, and I had die-cut letter P's just from the Ellison letter machine. I had a kid who would work for the letter P. Anyone else? I think by a long shot, my most popular was always gummies. All right. Well, thanks. Oops. All right. So I don't have a lot of updates from Godot today. However, we have a new program specialist for the autism department, or from the autism program, I guess. And so I'm going to let Ms. Florence Bry take a moment to introduce herself and say hello to everybody.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Florence Bry, and I joined the team at Godot back in February. So I am new to that team, but not new to the area. I was in and out of Chatham for over 20 years and in Louisiana for another 10, and did some private school regular ed for 5. So kind of have a wide scope. I will tell you, I left general education to work with young people on the spectrum, and fell in love with working with the population and never looked back. So I am very excited to be here with you all today, and look forward to having more of these, and very interested in hearing what you all express as your needs as we look at that as planning for the future for next year from our end at Godot as well. So I'm excited to be here, and thank you, Amanda, for inviting me.
You're so welcome. We're excited to have you here. All right. If you've enjoyed participating in our Autism Consortium this year, I want to encourage you to be on the lookout for our future events. The website's events.fdresa.org. We will also be sending out the flyers and registration info through email to directors. So just be on the lookout. In addition to this consortia, we have consortium meetings for many other programs, and some of these may be of interest to you based on your different positions. So in addition to autism, we also have a speech language pathology consortia, an assistive technology consortia, our First District Transition Alliance, which is for our transition team, a preschool consortia, And next year, we are also going to have school psychology consortiums. So if you fit into more than one category, we want to invite you to please participate in as many of these that will be beneficial to you as there are. And with all of these, we're always looking for feedback. So if there's a topic that you feel like you would love to present on or share resources for, then let us know. We love to involve you guys more. And then on a similar note, if there are topics or questions you have in these categories and you'd like us to, add to your repertoire and providing some professional learning or coming up with some resources, just let us know. And then this is an event we have coming up. I just wanted to quickly share. The flyer came out with the handouts from today, but we have started an Autism Parents Collaborative. And this is an opportunity for parents to receive training. It's an opportunity for them to connect with each other and just share resources like good camps that have been, helpful for their own children so they can share with each other. So this isn't necessarily about things at school. We're really trying to help them at home and in their community and make some connections. And if we do get questions about the school, we'll try and connect them to the right people, like their school's parent mentor. So if you have parents you think would be interested or would benefit from this, feel free to send the flyer home and we will get them the information. And now I am going to introduce you all to our guest speaker, Mr. Keller Street. He is with the Marcus Autism Center, and he is going to talk for the bulk of this meeting today, and he's going to give you guys some really valuable information. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over.
Can you guys hear me?
All right, let's give him just a second. For me, Keller, if I have two devices up, that is what happens. So it may be if you have the phone and that going.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Awesome, fantastically strong start. All right. What I was saying to no one was that probably not as funny now, but I was going to say maybe Amanda's giving too high of praise. We're not sure if this information will be super useful. But some of the things that I'm going to be talking about, a little bit in my background, she said that I'm from the Marcus Autism Center. I've been here for 4 years. I worked in our severe IOP unit for 4 years before moving to our school consult team late last year. So what we're going to be talking about today are some basic guidelines that we can use for looking at potentially mitigating challenging behavior in the classroom, which I'm sure you all have some experiences with. Does anyone have any guesses as to what the very first thing we would do with challenging behavior is before I bring up the slides and we start talking about it more systematically? Anyone want to take a stab at it? Let's see.
Come on, guys,
No?
don't be shy. It's okay to take a guess, and you can do it in the chat box if you're not as comfortable unmuting.
Yep, participatory. So finding out what causes them, yeah, that's a fantastic step. But it's not necessarily always the first step that I would take. It is the step that I would take as soon as we realize that we don't have control of the problem behavior. But actually first, what we will talk about is setting up structure and building plans and routine schedules. Because a lot of times what we see when we go to schools are there's a lot of downtime for the kids, or it's a little bit flimsy with what structure they're supposed to do, what room they might be in, if they have to go, between classes and things. And some days one teacher's like, oh, well, you can keep them over there. It's building in that structure and that routine. And oftentimes once we can get a consistent schedule across the board, we actually see some of that challenging behavior wash out. So that's where we're going to start today. We're going to talk about different ways of implementing schedules. I'm going to share my screen now. Let's see. Sorry, and I know we've had over 2 years to figure out technology, but I haven't been doing these presentations, so my technology is still a little bit wonky. Let's see. Was working a second ago. All right, can you guys see that?
Yep.
Perfect. So we use WebEx-based technology here, and this is Google Meet. So it's not really communicating with what I have here very well. So I actually can no longer see anyone's screens or the chat. So if you have something to say, someone just kind of poke your head in and say, like, check the chat box, and I can switch over and look at it. So as I said, we're going to start talking about planning, because this is what's coming up for you guys. We're going to start talking about what we can do to get in place before the beginning of next school year, so that you guys can hit the ground running. So for effective instruction, which I'm sure you guys all have really strong skills for, that's why you're in this profession, but we're going to talk a little bit about classroom setup and what we can do with those schedules and how to get that going. You'll need to understand where your learners are, because we need to meet them where they are. That's why they have the IEPs. It's all very individualized, because we know that that's what's cogent for our learners, and that's kind of how I also want this to go. I could sit here and talk at you guys about these slides and things, but if you have questions, it's more pertinent that we answer those questions and address like your specific needs, just like we do with our learners in our schools. So some class schedules. Why is it important to have a structured schedule? A lot of times when we're in the classrooms, I hear, a para be like, oh, what are we supposed to be doing right now? Where is so-and-so supposed to go? Or a teacher asking. And if we're not sure what's supposed to be happening, it's very likely that our learners also don't know what's supposed to be happening. And like I was saying, with challenging behavior, sometimes it helps wash it out a little bit. We see that providing that rigidity, that structure, helps them understand what's needed or what the rules are in their environment. It also just provides you an opportunity to be more pointed with your systematic instruction. It gives you that structured time, so you can kind of build your structure in a way that allows you to figure out how to provide breaks for your learners, as well as make it more effective when you're actually working with them on things. It allows the staff to know who's supposed to be doing what and at what time. And it allows you time to figure out, oh, well, maybe we can work on these skills with so-and-so, because these two learners are going to be doing like their break. It kind of allows you to see what your availability is. Another thing is just like learning to write or learning what your name is, learning to follow a schedule is a skill. And so providing schedules for not only the staff, not only for who's supposed to be doing what, we can talk about setting up schedules for the learners. Maybe they have visual schedules. Maybe if they're a little bit more advanced and can read, we can move to just written schedules and start teaching them how to keep track of their own schedules, which is a great skill that they're going to need. It can also, if you have a student or a learner who's really rigid and has challenging behaviors, when maybe they went home early because they got checked out for something extracurricular one day, having those schedules that you can, oh, I know that Susie's going to be checked out at noon today. You can put that into her schedule, and it's a little bit foreshadowing. It's preparing her for that. Schedules will help wash out that rigidity and that routine, because you can build in variations into the schedule. Does that make sense so far? I'm going to pretend that you're all
It does.
nodding your heads and saying yes. Sorry?
I said it does.
Perfect. So we can look at individualizing our schedules for our learners. We can have, one master classroom schedule that's broken down. I believe we sent out a template for that we can look at. It'll be up in a few slides. We can look at how to manipulate our teaching time. So, learners, they shouldn't have to go 4 hours straight of working one-on-one and things. It can allow us to see where we can slide in those break times. We can build in independent tasks, leisure opportunities, small group, large group. It's really adaptable for what your classroom needs are. It's just having something that when you run into, oh, I'm not sure what we can be doing or what we should be doing, it gives you something to kind of have a firm foot. You can use that as a backbone to keep going. So these are all the different things you should include. Their breakfast, their lunch, the dismissal times, all of those things can be put in. You can also, for some classrooms that I've been consulting in, we've built different schedules for each different day of the week because they have various services that come in. So, maybe they have OT that comes in on Wednesdays. We built a specific Wednesday schedule and things. So you always know what's going on. The learners always know what's going on, and it's helping prepare them for following their own sort of schedule. It allows us to make sure that if we know what all of our learners are supposed to be doing at any given time, we can provide stimuli in those different environments. So we have color-coded icons is a lot of what we'll do. Maybe the learner has and there's actually a picture of it, so we'll go there. So the bottom left, we can see different pictures. Sometimes we'll have the background be maybe blue, and the assigned area for maybe independent is at a desk in the back that has a blue match on the wall. So they would take their blue icon, match it to the blue station. That's where they know how to do that, where to do that work. And then they can move it to the right side to indicate that it's been done. And it's kind of letting them know what's left to come, what all they have to finish, and building our classroom in a way that works with our schedule. So we can have different stations. We don't want a ton of clutter around, which is difficult because of, we need a lot of toys and it needs to be a fun environment, but we also need to pay attention to make sure that it's not too exciting, because then the learner is going to be distracted by all the things that are on the wall. So we'll get into that a little bit as well. So using the rotation allows us to keep track. So the bottom right would be a schedule that kind of looks what the master schedule is. All of the students come in and they're all doing their arrival routine, hygiene and laundry things. Maybe then they eat breakfast, and then that kind of morning meeting where you maybe as a class talk about what day of the week is it, what's the weather like, what's the date, things like that. And then it breaks down into student 2 is going to be doing some leisure. So they'll be in the red section of the room. Student 3 is going to be doing some one-on-one, as well as student 1 in 2 different sections. And then maybe student 4 is kind of on a break with technology. You can really adapt it to however makes most sense for your classroom, but it's a really strong skill that we see time and time again kind of wash out the nuance of having to understand what the rules are. If we're more consistent, the learners are going to understand the rules a little bit more consistently as well. So when creating the class schedule, you need to just figure out, all of the basics. Make sure all of the learners are getting in all of those opportunities to get one-on-one time to practice DTT and different types of things. Making sure that we're determining what's an appropriate amount of instruction to what's an appropriate amount of leisure. And that's gonna, I can come in and I can talk about behavior and I can talk about ABA, but you guys are the experts on your kids. So you guys are gonna know what's the better situation for how long they can work before they should get a break and things like that. This is just, again, giving you like a little back foot, something that you can look at to keep track of where you're supposed to be. You can also build in the rotations, like I was saying, so they can follow their own schedule, which is teaching a massively important skill. Group activities like the calendar, when they're going to go to lunch, when they're going to go to gym, all of those various things that can sometimes throw, sometimes we see challenging behavior when it's around a transition, maybe somewhere else in the classroom or somewhere else in the school, building in that foreshadowing and building it into a systematic schedule is going to really help reduce that. Some things to consider is that downtime should be considered. A lot of times this is where problem behavior will, well, let me take that back. A lot of times problem behavior is going to occur seemingly at random or when demands are being placed, which is when, I can't remember who said it, but one of the first guesses was figuring out why it's happening. Exactly, that's when we would move into that. But things to consider is that downtime, if there's not really anything that they need to be doing, they're just kind of sitting there. I mean, I'm 20, 28, and I'm typically developing, and sometimes I'll get bored and I'll mess with things. The learners are no different. You know, they should have at least some small activity to do. Downtime kind of leads to questions of what's available, what's not available, what's available, what's not available. It also, sorry, I have some family things going on, so my phone went off. I apologize. Downtime, some teachers will allow, like, when there's downtime for them to maybe play on their laptop or something. Other teachers will be like, no, you need to, you know, go look at the books or things. It provides that question of what's available, so they're not entirely sure. And problem behavior, all behavior is communicative. It's just communicating that they want something or they need something. And we see that when those rules aren't adhered to or those rules aren't consistent. So now we're going to look at, I know we've looked at a few schedules, but we're going to look at a couple more. The reason, again, it helps the students navigate their day, just like yours does. It also helps facilitate the connection between words on a piece of paper, pictures, and activities, so that they can start building that skill of the correlation between, oh, I see a picture of a chair. I know that that's equivalent to a chair, essentially. Because that's a skill that also needs to be built. And you can format it, again, based on the learner. So are we going to use just pictures? Are we going to use words? Is it a checklist? What level are they at? Where can we meet them to have a schedule that makes sense for them? So for non-readers, obviously, we're going to go with pictures. So this will give them a visual stimuli, and then they'll go match it to that area, work on that aspect. And then they'll move it over to the other side when it's done. And it's kind of similar to a token economy of, like, I know when these pictures go all the way over, I'm kind of done. Not exactly the same. I know there's a BCBA in here who's ready to say that's not a token economy, but it's the general process. And then for emerging readers, we can use pictures with small phrases, small words, so that they can start kind of contacting, oh, okay, this word or this string of letters seems to, you know, take on the same stimulus control of whatever that picture is. And then we can fade those pictures out. And we might be able to start teaching that reading skills, where we have no pictures and they can see, okay, lunch, I know where this goes. I know where that is. Another thing that's important to have along with the learner's individual schedules is a nice classroom schedule. So that there's always something on the board to look at as well. Basically, we really want to get in and be very clear that there's always somewhere they can look to know what the rules are at any given moment. Any given time, they'll know what the rules are, and there's less likely to be some challenging behaviors. Here's another example of a classroom. So they have each student and all of their materials. They also have their reinforcer board so that they can choose what they're working for throughout the day. They're very organized. Each learner has their own color, and then these different colors on. So Brandon, his schedule, the top one, orange, that corresponds to a color-coded area in the classroom, or an activity book that he needs to be working on, things like that. So it's helping them stay structured. And then you can see the master schedule for the teachers and the staff up at the top. And we can see that this is a really clean environment, but it's not boring. So when you guys are setting up your classrooms, it's important to mitigate the clutter and you know, making sure that it's very clear which areas are designated for what, and without making it very clunky. So this is like their kind of planning process. They come in, they can check their schedule at their designated area, and then they can follow that schedule throughout the day. Am I flying through this? Does anyone have any questions, comments, jokes, snide remarks, anything so far?
Keller, I
All
really
right.
appreciate all the visuals that you've included.
Perfect, thank you. And then we'll keep plugging along with those visuals. Here's another one that we can look at. So they'll actually, for this schedule, they will move it and put their completed tasks into those pouches at the bottom. It helps, you know, keep everything in track. It takes the responsibility of keeping track of everything off of the teacher and you guys, because you guys, let's face it, have so many things that you have to do already. It helps keep it organized, consistent, and allows them to, again, just keep building that skill of how to look at their own schedule. Here's some more various schedules that we can look at, and just making sure that we can keep track. So these schedules are the whole classroom schedules. Again, just another visual stimuli that they can look at and keep track of. This is the example of the master schedule that we talked about a little bit earlier. This is the one that we sent out a template, and you can kind of use it however you need, set it up for whatever works for you guys. This is an example of a classroom that has 6 students. You can also make one for, well, I thought a different slide was going to come up next, so never mind. So this is an advanced schedule, or an advanced reader, only using words. When it comes to readers, the class schedule might be strong enough for them. The reason we break it down for classroom and individual schedules is the earlier learners are going to need a little bit more of an individualized approach to teaching that skill. So here's some, we were talking about staff schedules. We've already talked about this a little bit. I might start to go a little bit quicker through this section so that we can talk about preference assessments and things. But staff schedules, they free you up to actually teach. It allows you guys to figure out who is going to have lunch when, because that's always an absolute matrix in all of the classrooms I've been in. You guys have so many tasks that need to get done, and it kind of feels hectic. This gives you something that can hopefully provide a little bit of stability throughout the wildly unpredicted days. And it also gives you guys a little bit less time to, or gives you a little bit more time because you're not spending some time trying to figure out where everyone's supposed to be and what everyone's supposed to be doing. So this is an example of a teacher schedule, very similar to the master schedule for the students. But this is just, you know, where's the teacher during these sessions, where's the parapro during these sessions, and where's the parapro too. So you can also see where your support is, where the classroom unit's supposed to be, and who they're supposed to be assisting. So this can also help provide a little bit of clarity, and everyone can stay on the same page, and you guys can work as a team to keep the schedules running. So when providing schedules with the staff, let them do things that they're good at. It's reinforcing for them. You guys are all in, you know, this field because you enjoy teaching. So if there's someone who really is great at teaching this particular skill and they really enjoy that, we can use these schedules to maybe like, all right, yes, perfect. You can work on those math skills, things like that. We're giving an opportunity for the learners to learn social skills. We're giving, it keeps open communication with the whole team. You guys are all on the same page. And you can also use it as a way to facilitate a little bit of rapport with your team. You know, if you guys are getting into planning, having those parapros who are going to be in the trenches, in the classrooms with you day in and day out, they can also work with you to build that schedule. And now you guys have an agreed team component, and everyone's a little bit more bought in and willing to follow it because they have their input. So classroom setup, we're going to talk about just kind of keeping things clean, free of clutter, and then we'll talk about preference assessments. The reason that keeping the room clean and clutter-free is going to help with challenging behavior is I can't break things or throw things if there's not a whole lot of things for me to break and for me to throw. Again, like the nuance of figuring out what's available, what's unavailable is removed a little bit when we have very concise control over what's in the environment. So we only want what's really usually used with that student. They can easily see what's being presented. And these are kids. They are going to be wildly distractible. I'm sure you all know. So it'll help forcefully focus them a little bit. Probably don't want to use the word forcefully, but it'll help provide them the opportunity to remain a little bit more focused. So here's what we were talking about. We'll show some pictures of a classroom. This is the different areas they've used to tape that corresponds to different activities. So they've got their, orange or red section for one-on-one instruction. They've got green for that secondary one-on-one instruction. They have an independent section. The thing about the independent section is you can see that it's really clear from tons of toys and things. It's kind of forced the student into working with whatever's on the table, so we can put those independent activities there, and there's not a whole lot for them to engage with outside of that. And then independent 2, you can see the same. There's a little bit more materials there, but we don't really know exactly what those tasks are. And then there's leisure in the bottom left, which is very clean, but provides a wide space for them to kind of run around or lay. They've got some chairs in there. On those tables, what you can't see are actually a bunch of toys and things. So they do have materials. We're not saying, make your classroom destitute of all activity and all fun. But being intentional with how we set up our classroom can really help make it clear what's going on at any given moment for a learner. Group instruction table, so that's just pretty clear except for whatever the teacher is going to be bringing out. And then again, bottom right is going to be that blue section that corresponds to reading activities and tasks. Here's another example of another classroom. It's all very clear. They don't have the color coordinated things going on in here, but I believe there actually was a different system. But I can't recall it easily, so let's just keep it flying by. But you can see that there's a lack of clutter, but the room isn't destitute. It's still got things. It's just neatly put up and organized. Again, here's another way. This classroom is very clean, clutter-free, but there's still a ton of materials around. It's just very well structured. It's easy to get in between the activity groups or activity stations. So no one's going to get stuck anywhere or get confused on where they're supposed to go. It's very open and very clear where to go. So now what? We've got a fantastic schedule. We've got our room clutter-free. What do we need to do? To teach, we need to create a willing learner. So we need to identify preferred items. The reason that this is vital is it's going, you don't show up to work if you don't get paid. I'm not, we always work for something. It's kind of the foundation of everything. We get paid and that's why we come to work, things like that. Our students also need to be working for something. We need to figure out what's motivating them. And that's kind of coming into figuring out why they're engaging in challenging behavior. But before we even start looking at exactly why they're engaging in problem behavior, if we can figure out what they're motivated for, we can start putting in systems where, sit at this table and work for your iPad or work for an Apple or something like that. These are some things that we can start thinking about. So we're going to talk about preference assessment so that we can engage our students and we can figure out what they're willing to work for, and that will really help us get more control in the classroom. So first, we have to talk about what's the difference between a preferred item and a reinforcer. Does anyone know? Anyone want to take a stab at that? All right. So the difference is that a preferred item is something that they like. So I like pretzels, but a reinforcer means that I'm actually going to change my behavior. I will work for it. I like pretzels, but I'm not coming and, setting up these presentations or going into the schools because Diva gives me 5 pretzels at the end of each day. I'm coming in, I'm not willing to work for it. It's something I like, but I'm not willing to work for it. So we need to figure out what their preference assessments tell us what they like. It doesn't necessarily tell us what they're willing to work for. That's something that we're going to have to figure out as we start using them. But it helps us really get an understanding of what they might be working for. It's not always a reinforcer, just like I was saying. So there's a couple of different ways that we can conduct preference assessments. We can look at indirect ways. We can talk to caregivers, do those interviews, find out, do they like musical toys, light toys, things like that. And that can help us have an idea of what they might be willing to work for. We can always ask the student, depending on their level. It's not always accurate. Sometimes they only want it in that moment, especially if it's a novel item. We can also just simply observe what they do in their free time. What kind of activities and items are they drawn to when they're in their spare time? Or we can conduct actual formal preference assessments. So again, this is identifying what they are more likely to be working for. So some of the assessments, I sent out a cheat sheet as well for you guys. So free operant is, well, we're going to talk about all of these a little bit more in a second. So some other things to worry about, or not worry, don't ever worry, we're all good. Some things to keep in mind are the preferences change. Maybe they're satiated with pretzels and maybe they want something else. There's also, edibles are primary reinforcers. You don't have to be taught to like food. So if you're comparing toys in a preference assessment with edible items, you might not be getting a true hierarchy because they might be going after the edibles because it's more, maybe they don't know how to play with that toy or something. So keeping in mind the displacement value of edible items. So another reason to look at why we use reinforcement is Diva loves this cartoon. Kid stands up on the table to get some cookies and mom's yelling at him, no, driving a skateboard on the couch and he's getting yelled at, no, everything seems to be wrong. Mom says you really pushed your buttons today and he's kind of exasperated, well, where's the one for yes? We need to catch them being good. We need to reinforce the behaviors that we do want to see more, verbal praise or some of these items that we've identified as potential reinforcers. And reinforcement increases the likelihood that a behavior will occur again. So always toss out some freebies. Like if you say, oh, hey, come have a seat with me and they take a seat. Awesome, fantastic job taking a seat. Here's, your Captain America thing for 5 to 10 seconds. And then you can get into those instructions and kind of build up that coming to the table is associated with reinforcement. It's also a great time to be pairing. So pairing is just something I'm going to briefly mention. Pairing is having the learner associate us with reinforcement. We need, you'll interact with your significant other far differently than you're willing to interact with me or Amanda or anyone else. And here, because of that history of reinforcement, that environment, that relationship that you have with them. And that's kind of the same principle that we want to use when we're doing this. So when they come in early in the next year and you start working with identifying their preferences or the potential reinforcers, it's a really nice time to build in naturally that pairing and, making it easy for them to, oh, it was really nice when I was hanging out with Miss So-and-so. That was fantastic. She gave me tons of chips. I'm definitely going to go hang out with her again. And keep in mind that there's a history of reinforcement. So these learners may not have had great pairing. If they're in the 5th grade, then that's a few years of potentially negative stimulus control, aversive stimulus control that you're kind of fighting against. So we want to make sure that we're making it positive and we can give them access to the things they like. That's why it's so vital that we can find out what they like. So reinforcers, we're trying to find out what their paycheck is, what they're willing to work for. Preference, again, is a good approximation. Preferences change throughout the day, especially if it's food. They may satiate on that food, get full, things like that. They also might get bored if they've been playing with the iPad for a few minutes. They might not be as motivated for the iPad again. So One of the first ways that we can look at doing a preference assessment is called free operant, where we'll provide access to all of the items that they might enjoy, and you can just take data on how long they interact with each item. It's not going to give you a true hierarchy, but it might give you some indicator of which ones are more preferred or more interesting to that specific individual. You can take data on how long they engage with them, what order they engage with the items, and it will give you a nice starting point. Paired stimulus is you're going to be presenting the items in pairs. So here we're looking at, we presented some little, I have no idea what those are. We presented little colorful clappy things, I don't know, and a guitar. So this would be, if you guys can see me, we have a guitar, we have these little clappy things, pick one, and then they'll choose, and we can rank in the various orders what they chose, the clappy things over the guitar, and things like that. The things to keep in mind when it comes to paired stimulus, though, is there might be a side bias. So if there's a side bias, it means that they're always picking maybe the item that was last shown to them or always on the right, something like that. Those are things that you might want to look at. And then after they make the selection, they'll be provided 30 seconds of access to the item. And again, we'll do a different pairing. We've got an iPad and a guitar. They made sure to switch which side the guitar was on to see if maybe there's some sort of side bias, but they chose the iPad. And so they chose the iPad. What would we do next? We would provide them 30 seconds with the iPad. We would do another trial where we provided the option for Play-Doh and a guitar, and they'll make a selection, and they will be given 30 seconds of access to the paired stimulus. So what you're going to want to do with this is you're going to want to write out kind of systematically how to pair every single item with every other item, and you're going to want to randomize the sequence. The reason you're going to want to randomize the sequence is kind of that satiation component that we were discussing, where maybe if they were doing, if you did 3 trials in a row with guitar, maybe they picked guitar twice, and then they might like the guitar more than the next item that it's paired with, but since they've already been playing with the guitar, they might be a little bit bored with it. They've kind of, sung all the ballads that they needed to sing already, and so we might not see that true hierarchy because they've been satiated with that item. So you can do this kind of spread out in trials, just kind of every now and then providing options to it, and you're going to want to record which one was selected, and that'll let us know what the hierarchy is. So this is kind of what your data sheet would end up looking like. Sorry, I think there's a couple. And then you'll see that our iPad was selected 3 times, which means that it's the most preferred out of those items. Play-Doh, clearly the least preferred. It didn't beat any of the other items. All we're doing is taking data on how often it was selected, because that's going to tell us kind of what hierarchy there is. The next most systematic one is called an MSWO. So that is multiple stimulus without replacement. What that means is we're going to have all of the different items in front of the learner and at an equidistant. So if the learner's right here, you're going to want to make sure that it's in a bit of an equidistant semicircle in front of them so that it's not easier to grab any of these items, because that might be some sort of prompt. It might, maybe the kid's super lazy, and so the closest one is the one I'm going to grab. We're going to want to make sure that it's a crescent moon, equal distance from the learner, and provide all of those options. They'll make a selection, and we will provide them with 30 seconds with that item. After we've given them 30 seconds with that item, we're going to actually restate the rearrange the layout and not put that item back in. So now that they've shown that they chose the clappy things first, and now they're making the selection out of the remaining items. So this is where that without replacement comes in, obviously. It's very aptly named. We're not very creative with our names. And then they'll make that selection from there. And once they make that selection for the iPad, they will get 30 seconds with it, and then we'll continue on. We'll reset the array and allow them to make a selection. And so they'll get 30 seconds, and then the last one, we'll still have them select it, and they'll get 30 seconds. So we can do this kind of varied throughout the day. You know, I've had some learners where when he first comes in, we'll run an MSWO, and we'll kind of use that as our idea of what he's currently working for. And then after he comes back from lunch, we would run another one just to see if things have changed in that afternoon. Something that I realized I've neglected to say, throughout all of these preference assessments, besides free operant, you can do it for free operant, but the paired stimulus, the MSWO, we want to do what's called pre-exposure. So before we go into those trials, you're going to one by one have them play or give them the option to play with each item. So before I run the MSWO, I'm going to provide access to the Matchbox car and tower for 30 seconds. And then I'll restrict that, and I'll provide them access to the iPad for 30 seconds, restrict that basketball and hoop for 30 seconds, and so on and so forth, so that they've had exposure to what all of the different items are. So that there's no novel items, they know which one. We can see that they know how to interact with it. It's not some alien sort of item. It gives them the opportunity to know what it is, and then they can have a more informed selection. Leisure items versus activities and food. This is what I was talking about earlier, the displacement. Individuals are much more likely to select food over leisure activities. This is just in literature. It's easier. You don't have to learn how to like food. For activities, you can use pictures as long as they have the skill to know that the picture corresponds to a certain activity. Because, you know, if it's a trampoline or something, it's going to be pretty difficult to be bringing that up onto a table and stuff. Or there might not be an item associated with it. If it's tag or something like that, you can use a picture. So this is a little chart for what preference assessments are best. The free operant is super easy. All you do is just take record data, how long they played with each item in a certain amount of time. The disadvantage is it doesn't really give us a hierarchy. The only time it does is if the individual really only interacts with one item. That tells us that that item is very potent, but it doesn't give us a hierarchy, so we can't, you know, if we want them to respond independently for a task, and we know their top preferred item and like the fourth or fifth preferred item, if they respond independently, we can give that really high preferred item. And if they respond, you know, they maybe need a gestural prompt or a partial physical or something, we can still reinforce that they're engaging in that activity, but we can differentially reinforce it by providing maybe the fourth item in the hierarchy. So it's reinforcing it, but it's not as potent, so that they can learn, oh, well, when I did it independently, I got this. So that we're not, you know, preventing them from getting the things they want, but we can kind of use a hierarchy to our advantage when it comes to teaching those systematic trials. The single stimulus, we didn't really talk about this one, but you're going to just have only one item. It works with individuals. Sorry. Some of the disadvantages are that it is a little bit tough with individuals who don't do well when items are restricted because you're consistently taking them out. You can test lots of different potential reinforcers in really quick succession. Sorry. And then we talked about the paired stimulus. The paired stimulus is going to be, it's the most thorough. Every item is compared with every other item, so it gives us a really strong hierarchy. And the disadvantage is that it takes a long time. Some individuals get upset when the items are removed. We can also potentially see that side bias pop up. And then the MSWO, again, provides that true hierarchy. It doesn't take as long as a paired stimulus because you don't have to go through all of the different trials of and then vice versa. Most of my students or most of my learners, and it gives us a hierarchy. The only time it's a little is when individuals get upset when I happen, regardless, really, except for every operand. So what can we do? We're in this environment now with COVID and things, virtual preference assessments. What can we do? We can talk to the student if the student has the ability to provide that answer accurately. We can get parents on board, and maybe parents can do some of these assessments. We can assess the student responses. We could do would you rather. So I've had a sit down with an individual where we were just kind of like, all right, if you were given the option, would you rather jump on a trampoline or play Uno with your mom? And he had really strong interverbal skills. He had really strong selective skills. So that was one way that we were able to go through with it without being able to be there and doing that. And again, this is all coming back to increasing the motivation. If they know that they can get these preferred items through that structured instructional time, then there's a less likely chance that they'll be motivated to engage in challenging behavior because they already have an effective way to get to that item. Get students involved, surprises each day. You can do really exciting things with the Bitmojis I've seen in a lot of classrooms. It also helps with virtual classrooms, having those cartoons that kind of engaging characters, active student responding. So for virtual, you can have the thumbs up and the thumbs down for understanding, different polls, and increasing their motivation through the potential reinforcers, increasing the students' learners or understanding of schedules. These are all things that are going to help displace and kind of wash problem behavior out. These are some of the basic strategies that we can look at. It helps them learn the rules. Once they learn the rules, there might not be that motivation to engage in those challenging behaviors. And I think that leaves us with some time for questions. Does anyone have, oh no, what is happening here? Am I still sharing?
You're not still sharing, but we can see you now.
Perfect. Yeah, I apologize about that. I'm still learning the technology between Google Docs and things. Does anyone have questions, comments, jokes, gratuitous snide remarks, anything? I apologize if I just kind of like sprinted through that and talked at you. I'm still learning how to do virtual presentations.
I want to thank you so much for coming. I loved the visuals. I like the pictures of actual classrooms and kind of showing a variety of ways that it can look. One question that I'm going to ask, and I can propose it to you, but also to the teachers, I guess, is when would you suggest, or the frequency of doing these preference assessments?
It depends on your learners. I actually would say the first one-on-one session with my kids, I kind of go ahead and get that information because it changes from day to day, and it just allows me to kind of have more of a control over what I know they're working for, especially for that day. It makes it a little bit more potent. Plus, it's always a good opportunity. It's a preferred activity. They're kind of getting to, it's a little bit of pairing at the very start of every day if you kind of do one of those assessments, and helps you understand what they're going to want for that day, helps them realize that you're not just going to tell them to do a bunch of work. Sometimes you've got toys and stuff as well.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking it's a great way to kind of get the day started on the right foot, especially with some of those more reluctant learners.
Exactly.
Does anyone have any questions for him, or does anyone have an experience to share who's already used some of these tools?
I have a question. As far as looking at your schedule, We are in a preschool classroom, and it seems like, we've tried to have the schedule laid out, but what do you kind of have in place for, or any suggestions? It just seems like it never fails that, okay, well, this one now has to go to the bathroom, or this. It just seems like the best laid plans don't ever work out. I just don't know about, like setting up the schedule or trying to have something in place for those things that seem to come up that keep you
Yeah.
from being able to follow the schedule.
So that makes sense. I mean, yeah, I agree. Lots of things happen, especially in a pre-K environment. But without having a schedule, the teachers don't really have a uniform response to what happens. If it's going to the bathroom, maybe you can add in to those sections where the different learners have the opportunity to go to the bathroom. It's kind of put into their routine. I'm trying to figure out like kind of some of the things that you would say coming up. But for things that pop up, that's life. But without having a schedule in place, it's hard for the teachers and like the parapro team to have a uniform understanding of what's going on at any given moment. And so with having a schedule, it allows you guys to get back on track quicker when those things do happen. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right.
I'm going to jump in here too, because the other part of that with, I've got two things actually. The other part of that is it provides that teachable moment. So we didn't go on schedule, and that is really life. Schedule or no schedule, that is really what happens in life. And sometimes it's a teachable moment, especially with our kiddos who are really attached to that rigidity and that routine. So I really think it's an opportunity. It's not always pretty. Now, I'm not going to sit here and blow sunshine at you, but that's part of it. And that's sometimes when the best learning and teaching happens. The other thing that I was going to say is I am so thrilled, Keller, that you brought up about preference assessments, because what I learned in the past when I was in the classroom is parents would tell me, "Oh, Amanda loves jelly beans." Well, I'm doing my best to get her to work for jelly beans, and Amanda, when we actually ended up doing a preference assessment, really would rather have had M&Ms. It was more what the parents thought the kids liked rather than when the kiddo had a choice, what they actually chose. It was sometimes really big discrepancy between those two things. So I'm a huge fan of preference assessments, and I am so glad that you shared all that information with this group about them, because it's one of those it's like a secret. It's worth every minute of the time that you put in, because the payoff is well worth the time on the front end. So thank you for
Exactly. You're welcome. Yeah, it definitely allows you to kind of hone in and individualize, what they're working for. It's kind of meeting the learner with what they want and working as a team with them. Yeah. Thank you.
I just wanted to note, remind everybody that when you're using these, you may have to get a little bit specific or creative, because our kiddos tend to be a little bit more particular about certain things. So it could very well be that I do love jelly beans, but you don't have the Jelly Belly, like popcorn jelly beans that my parents always buy for me. And the ones that you're giving, I'm pushing away. I mean, I had students who were very specific about the brand of like chicken nuggets their parents could put in the lunchbox, or they wanted the iPad, but they only wanted the iPad with the purple case because they figured out guided access isn't on that one. So when you're doing these, I mean, at first you're just going to start from scratch because they're new students and you haven't really gotten to know them. But as you get to know your students, I think these can go quicker because you know kind of the things to present. But if you're not getting something, like if you're presenting the iPad and you know he loves it, but for some reason he's not picking it, it may be that you need to pull up the app he likes to play and show that, when you're presenting it in the assessment, because that might be actually the thing that's reinforcing is the app, not necessarily the iPad that he doesn't know how to get it open to what he wants to do.
Completely agree.
Any other questions or comments for Keller?
I'll just add that I work with teachers sort of as an instructional coach and adaptive. I don't necessarily always work with students with autism, but I really like how you said, don't allow for questions of what's available, because I'm constantly saying like, okay, you keep telling me they're in this thing, but it's still visible. The thing you're telling me that the behavior is coming from that, but it's still visible. So I just like how you said that. So thanks for putting it that way. Don't allow for questions of what's available.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Keller, we really appreciate your time today. I know you've got a lot going on, and it is very much appreciated on our end that you still were able to make time for us. If you will send me your slides or a PDF of your slides, then I will make sure that everybody gets this information. And we do have the recording as well.
Perfect. And thank you guys so much for having me. I really love that we have these going on. These are really helpful, I think. So I'll send that over to you, but thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you so much. All right, and if you guys stay on for just another minute, I've got a couple things to share. First, I think I already included these with the handouts, but if not, I'll make sure that you get them with the slides. There are two really easy to read and really good material-wise articles I got from Teaching Exceptional Children on these topics. So the first is about ABA in the classroom, really acknowledging that the classroom is not a clinic. There are a lot of things that us as teachers have to get done in a day and that we need to get done in a day. And it really talks about ways to utilize the research and the evidence without necessarily feeling like you have to replicate, the whole program that would take place in a clinic. Because we know you've got academics to work on, you've got specials and lunch and all those different things. So it's just a really good article. And the other one is talking about some antecedent interventions or interventions that you put in place on the front end to prevent behaviors from happening. So when you get these and you read through them, if there are things that they mention that is something that you are curious about, that's something that we would be interested in hearing about, because we can get speakers to talk about it. I can provide some information about it, or we can pull some resources to share. Because it's kind of difficult sometimes to address some like specific behaviors in these kinds of consortia, because we can't talk about specific students or the way that we're going to respond when the behaviors happen is really going to be dependent on why the student's doing that behavior. So thinking about those preventative strategies is going to be the way to go on the front end for sure. You're also going to receive these resources in your email. The first are all the handouts from Keller. And the second link is actually some different data sheets that you can do, reinforcement inventories, like those surveys or questionnaires that you're going to do with students or with their parents, and then some data sheets for preference assessments as well. I also just wanted to quickly share with you the link to an upcoming webinar series on self-regulation and best practices for collaboration between special ed teachers and OTs. These are free, whether or not you're a member of the CEC. But if you have students who have self-regulatory issues, they have a hard time staying calm or getting their bodies back calm once they've been escalated, students who have a lot of self-stimulatory behavior that tends to impede maybe on their ability to focus, these webinars give some good strategies for that. And you will get the link. All right, and I am going to put this link in the chat box. It is the link for our needs assessment. And since we have a little time, I would actually really love if you just take the time to fill it out now. But if you need some time to think about it, by all means. And I see some things in the chat box I'm just going to read aloud to share in case anyone didn't see. The Georgia Aquarium is now a certified autism center. Shelly put the link about it in the chat box. I also saw this article come through, but they have added some features to make it more friendly for students on the spectrum. And then we also have in the chat box that I have just put in place for one of my students for the schedule and the reinforcers as well, taking things out of my room. I very much agree with what Angela said. It is so important for certain students to not only like not have access to things during instructional time, but not to see it, because seeing it is distracting them and making them not able to focus. So keeping those rooms clean and letting them know what is available and what is not available is great. It also cuts down on some of those issues that our kids tend to have, like pica. If you have a student who puts everything in their mouth, then we're going to have to put all those small things out of their reach.
It's a win-win too, because it also forces them to ask for stuff that they want.
Absolutely. More opportunities for communication. All right. And that is it on our end, unless you guys have any questions for me or comments that you want to post to the group. Otherwise, feel free to put them in that needs assessment. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Flo.
Parents, hey Shelly. They understand what we do. It's Misty. Can't see me. That makes any sense. Yes.
But I recognize your voice, Misty. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I was so excited to see your name in the chat box. I'd like to see your actual face one day.
Well, hold on. I might because
Yeah, the camera's right there.
Is that right here?
It's the green.
Right there. Where?
The green light.
Oh,
All right.
you can put it up.
moving around. I can. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you too. It's
I
been a long
know.
time.
It's been a long time. You look great.
They're grown. My kids are grown.
Yes, my baby.
How old's the baby?
Hayne is graduating from high school this year.
And Courtney's
Yeah.
just graduating from nursing school. So, yeah. And
Oh, wow.
Well, on a side note, my husband passed away over the summer. So we have been through quite a bit of transition.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Shocking. Sorry. But yes. So anyway,
We need to catch up. Let's go have lunch or do something, okay?
let's do it. I'll send you an email. I think I
Okay,
can find
sounds
it.
good.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.